Chapter 2, Segment 3. Brain features that are visible to the naked eye. There are 3 parts to this section. First being the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is important for movement and high-level cognition. Part of the frontal lobe is the precentral gyrus, the strip of the frontal cortex just in front of the central sulcus that is crucial for motor control. Weidel Pensfield revealed that precentral gyrus was involved in movement in his study. Another part is corpus callosum. The corpus callosum is a bundle of axons right between the 2 hemispheres of the brain. This functions to connect both sides of the brain so that the brain can act as a single entity during complex processing. The third part visible to the naked eye is gray and white matter. Gray matter is the exterior of the brain and contains a preponderance of neural cell bodies and dendrites, and is involved in processing and receiving information. The second part being white matter consists of mostly axonal fiber tracts, which transmits information to other locations. Next is developmental subdivisions of the brain. The development of the brain begins with a neural tube made up of cells, which contains fluid, also known as cerebral spinal fluid. Then there are 3 separate dwellings of the brain, being the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. Within and between each region of the brain are aggregations of neurons called nuclei and bundles called tracts. Within each of the 3 sections, there are some distinctions to be noted. In the forebrain, there are about 50 days after conception, the telecephalon and the dicephalon develop. The dicephalon will eventually become the thalamus and hypothalamus, and the telecephalon will become the cortex, basal ganglia, and the limbic system. Then there's the midbrain. This is also known as the mesocephalon, and this is the middle part of the brain. It consists of the tectrum, superior callosum, inferior callosum, red nucleus, and reticular formation. Lastly, the hindbrain. This is the portion of the brain that contains the metacephalon and the mesocephalon, also known as the medulla. The next section being the brain shows regional specialization of function. One important aspect of the brain is each side controls the opposite side. So the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body, and vice versa. This is called contralateral, where each side of the brain controls the opposite side of the body, like I said. The cerebral cortex performs complex cognitive processing. So the neurons in the cerebral cortex are arranged in 6 distinct layers. In some of the regions of the cerebral cortex, neurons are organized into regular columns, which are perpendicular layers that seem to serve as information processing units for the brain. Additionally, subcortical structures are involved in movement and regulation of emotions. One of the many clusters of structures in the brain is the limbic system. This system is directly involved in learning, processing, odor perception, and emotion, among many other things, obviously. And then the cerebellum is attached to the pons and is crucial for motor control. So the cerebellum is another part of the brain that is directly involved in movement and motor control, and it's connected to the pons, like I said. And the middle layer of the cerebellum is called the Purkinje cells, which are fan-shaped dendritic patterns. The medulla maintains vital basic functions. So medulla contains cell bodies which control neck and tug movement. Since the medulla contains nuclei that regulate heart rate and breathing, damage is often fatal. So any damage to the medulla potentially affects your breathing and how your heart rate is going to be. Next, behavior and cognitive abilities are determined by functional connections between the brain regions. So cortical regions communicate with one another via tracts of axons looping through underlying matter. So the brain obviously needs to communicate with one another, and they do this through the tracts of axons. Next, specialized support systems protect and nourish the brain. The brain and spinal cord are enveloped by three protective membranes called meninges. The meninges has three parts: the pia mater, the dua mater, and the arachnoid. Each has its own function. The cerebral ventricles are filled with fluid. So the cerebral ventricles are filled with fluid that serves two main functions. First being that it mechanically acts as a shock absorber for the brain, and second, provides a medium for the exchange of materials between vessels. Each hemisphere contains a lateral ventricle extending into the four lobes. This ventricle is lined with a membrane called the choroidal plexus. Additionally, it's important to note that the cerebral spinal fluid flows from the third ventricle to the fourth ventricle, and then eventually leads to these three small openings and exits the ventricle system and circulates over the outer surface of the brain. Thank you.